Lately, Raymond and I have been time-lapse monsters. We want to take a few minutes today to tell you why and what we plan to keep on doing with them. A time-lapse video is created from a series of images. In my mind, time-lapses sort of bend time.
You see the long-term changes in an environment over a short period of time. For our photography, it's added a new dimension, and one of those ways to keep the spark alive, we bring an extra camera or two with us, and then we certainly have more to talk about when we do time lapses.
In today's video, we will show you how we have set our cameras for a few of our recent time-lapse excursions. We'll show you some results. And for members, Raymond also put together a video this week showing the very easy steps that he used to create this star trail time-lapse with our Nikon D500, the painted desert of northern Arizona, and a full moon. Specifically, he walked through how he went from 515 unedited images, how he quickly edited all of them, added the star trail effects, and then sequenced them together into the MP4 file.
Now, if you're not a member yet, check out that join button down below or the link in the description of the video. In that video, I focused specifically on Lightroom and Photoshop, but there's certainly more ways to do it, and we'll be highlighting some of those additional ways in the very near future also. For gear, almost every camera we have has an interval timer built in, but there's external hardware options also that have some similar flexibility or even greater flexibility.
We'll show you how we set up a few different brands in a minute. For our D810, we added a battery grip that lets us hot swap the battery in the grip while the camera then uses a battery in the normal location while the swapping takes place. For our Z cameras, we purchased this item. It's a placeholder battery that can plug into an AC outlet. For power, we have a power bank with an AC socket, and when practical, we also bring our Energy Apex with its hefty battery and 6 AC sockets. I'll link to those power-related items in the description.
For our settings, we tend to shoot in ways where any individual image from the time-lapse will stand on its own. For example, with stars moving in the night sky for a time-lapse, you could use a longer shutter speed for a very smooth night sky animation. However, we prefer to keep our shutter speeds tight so that the stars are nice round dots, not blurs, not arcs. You still have plenty of processing options, as I show in that member video, after you've captured the time-lapse, so that you can assure the right look and feel for however you want your time-lapse to be. With regard to individual environments and within your memory card storage constraints, you'll want to consider how frequently you want that shutter to fire. The more often it does, the smoother the look, the more options you'll have in post. But by shooting more often, you could potentially burn through your storage very quickly, so you've got to consider that as well.
Let's show you how we set our cameras for time lapses, at least for 3 brands that we've used lately: Nikon, Sony, and Fuji. Specifically, we will show you on the Nikon Z6 and 7, the Sony Alpha 7 R4, and the Fujifilm X100F. First, for all of the brands, we opt for the option that has the most flexibility, but also takes the most storage space and processing. We have our cameras shoot large RAW files for the duration of the time lapse, and then use software later on to edit the images en masse and then sequence them into a film. And again, Raymond shows members the software and specifics in that video that I mentioned earlier. Beyond that, settings vary by camera, so let's get to those individual brand settings. First, looking at the Nikon, the first thing that we will do on any of the cameras is go to make sure we are using RAW, and then also, if we have the option of RAW large versus RAW medium or small, we're going to use RAW large. And then we are going to use the largest or highest bit depth. So in this case, it is 14-bit on this Z6. Moving into the interval timer options on the Z cameras, we have choose start date and time. That's just going to be current start date and time. If there's a start now, I would use that. Now, in this case, let's go back to my settings. I have the lens cap on, so you can't see the actual frame, but I also do know that there is no memory card in this camera, just so that everybody doesn't freak out about it. You can see that my settings right now are a shutter speed of 6 seconds, and I am shooting wide open at f2.8, and well, the ISO sensitivity doesn't matter right now because it's going to be different with every situation. Okay, so back to my interval. Looking at the interval, that is going to be the amount of time between the beginning of each shot. So because I'm using a 6-second shutter speed, I'm going to say 15-second intervals, because you need to remember that you need to get through these 6 seconds of shutter speed and then anything else that you have set up. If you have noise reduction on, if you have long exposure noise reduction or high ISO noise reduction, you're going to need to allow the camera to finish those before your next photo begins 15 seconds after that first 6 seconds begins. Now, if you turn those off, you don't have to worry about it quite as much, but you do still need to consider the right time to the card and everything like that. So we're going to go with 15 seconds. And then intervals times shots per interval. The intervals is how many times you're going to take photos. So we usually do somewhere in between 500 and 1,000. It really just depends on how long we want our interval to be going. So, hey, 901 sounds good. And then we are going to have it go 1 shot per interval. So we will end up with 901 shots at the end. And then on these Z cameras, we have more options. We can use exposure smoothing. We don't really need to do that. We could use silent photography on or off. We really do like to use silent photography. And then there is interval priority, which will prioritize taking the shot. And we usually just turn this off. It's not really a consideration for us. And then under this starting storage folder is 2 really handy options that we like to turn on. Every time we start a new interval, you can see that if we have this checked, a new folder will be begun on the memory card. That's handy just to keep everything separate. We also like to reset file numbering back to 0001 because there are some cameras that will end the interval if you don't reset, or if you rather go past 9999. Or this also just helps keep things in order. If you go past 9999 to 0001 in the middle of your interval, it just kind of messes up your flow when you're editing and looking at your images later on. So that's how we set up our Nikon Z cameras. Now on the Sony Alpha 7 R4, I am using the same settings. So I've got a 6-second shutter speed, and I am shooting wide open as I typically do, at least for astrophotography. This is, of course, all going to depend on exactly what I'm going to be shooting, but this is just an example. So we have interval shoot function and interval shooting. Do we have it on or off? Right now it's off because I'm not ready for it to begin. And then we have shooting start time. This is just when the interval timer is going to begin. So in this case, if I were to have 1 second and go to on, 1 second later, my intervals would begin. And I'm going to use the same interval as I did on the Nikon at 15 seconds, but I could move it up or down here. I really like at the bottom of the screen here that it reminds me how many total shots that I'm going to have and the shooting time as well. So I can see, oh, okay, this interval will be going for 4 hours or over 4 hours in this case. And then number of shots, I can change that here. Again, it's reminding me the shooting interval and shooting time at the bottom of the screen. And then auto exposure tracking sensitivity. I am shooting in manual for this example of a time lapse. If I was not, this would help basically the smoothing of the exposure changes. And then on my next little mini menu, I have silent shooting and interval, which yes, I almost always want that. and then shoot interval priority. I do not need that again, just like on the Nikon, because I am shooting in manual right now. And on the Fuji X100F, remember I am using lossless compressed RAW when I can. I typically do, for all of the cameras, turn off long exposure noise reduction, just because it's something I can do in post-processing later on. Now on to interval timer shooting. All right, let's do this again. The interval, we want it to be 15 seconds. And then number of times, we can go up and down this chart until we get to the number that we want. I know it's a little bit tedious, but I'm just pressing the up arrow until I get there. All right, so we can go all the way up to 999 shots or intervals, but one cool thing that Fuji has is infinity, so the camera will just keep taking photos until it runs out of space or battery. We'll just go to 999. And then start waiting time. Do I want it to begin right now as soon as I, hit the OK button, or do I want it to begin in 1 hour or in 1 minute? Typically, I just want it to go ahead and start.
Let's talk about storage. We returned from our Yellowknife trip with 24,000 14-bit RAW images from 4 different cameras. It's a bit of a storage nightmare. On the spot, we kept 2 local independent backups of everything that we did. And then once we arrived home, we did still have those local copies that we were working with, but we immediately began an upload to our cloud storage provider, Amazon Photos. We use their plan where you can store unlimited still images on their servers. It seems almost ideally suited for storing thousands of time-lapse images. We don't want to overwhelm our local storage with images that we're certainly not going to retrieve very often, but we enjoy having the peace of mind of these offsite backups. Knowing that one thing we might do in the future as we learn more advanced techniques is revisit some of those image collections and create better, improved versions of some of those past time lapses with some of the new things that we've learned.
One more hardware note. We have ordered a very exciting item that will help take over the time-lapse process for our cameras. It's the Time-Lapse Plus View. It tells the camera what to do. You're no longer relying on the camera's built-in interval timer, and it can change exposure intelligently as it goes. The goal for us is to capture life-changing time lapses that pass through day and night, with the hardware telling the camera exactly how to adjust exposure smoothly as the light changes. We don't have it quite yet, but we're definitely anxious to check it out. We will definitely share more about it once we gain experience with it.
A word of caution and warning for those who haven't started on time lapses yet. Once you start, you can really get hooked. Leigh and I find ourselves brainstorming about different locations we're traveling to, always asking, how will we time-lapse that? What hardware will we use? What are we going for? And we ask those questions really far ahead of more important questions like, where are we going to stay? What will we eat? So it is definitely addictive.
Very soon, we have a longer form course coming about time lapses, going in depth on all of the considerations for different environments. We'll go beyond what we have discussed today in this video and what Raymond discussed in the member video earlier this week. And down in those comments, let us know. Have you made some amazing time lapses and posted them online somewhere that you can link to? Have you maybe just started and have some questions? Or do you have some software and techniques that make the process super simple? Let us know down in the comments. And thank you for watching.